Good evening, good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're doing well on this rainy Monday afternoon in Cape Town. Hope you guys all had a good weekend. And yeah, I'm excited for today's session. I'd ask that you please just bear with me today. I'm not feeling too well, but I'll just see how we get through the session today. I think Adele has already asked that we all put your student numbers in the chat, and I have seen a few student numbers already. For those coming in, please just add your student numbers in the chat. Let me just try to find the attendance register. Okay, I've just posted the link for the attendance register. So if you could also please just take a minute to fill that in, and then we'll get started. Maybe give 3 more minutes for some more people to join us, and then yeah, we can get on with it. Okay, I hope that everyone has had a chance to fill out the attendance register and get settled in. I hope that we all have our study guides with us so that we can follow along. Yeah, okay. All right, for those who are new to the sessions or who have joined us for the first time, welcome. And for everyone who has been attending the sessions, welcome back. This is our 6th session. This is our 6th session. That's a bit of a tongue twister there. And yes, most of you all should know the process by now, but just a reminder to please keep your cameras and mics off. If you do want to say something, if you want to comment or ask a question, you're welcome to do that by using the raised hand icon, and then I can recognize you and give you the floor to unmute your mic and then ask your question or make your comment. And yeah, or you could just pop your question or comment in the chat. I will be keeping an eye on the chat during the session, so just feel free to engage with me and engage with your fellow students throughout the session. I just want to remind everyone again that we do have one-on-one consultations available, and you're welcome to schedule those through your My Life, or by emailing CT and Tut, and then just requesting a one-on-one session with myself, and there we can maybe discuss in a little bit more detail some of the things that you are struggling with and that we've not had a chance to cover in our sessions. All right, if there are any technical difficulties that you are having with regards to accessing these sessions, but obviously if you're here, I'm assuming that there are no technical difficulties, but if you are having any types of difficulties, I believe that this is not the platform, and unfortunately I will not be able to address those questions, but you can email CT and Tut and they will be able to assist you. And once again, I've put the attendance register in the chat for those who have just joined. Please fill out the attendance register. Okay, so maybe to recap what we did last week, we sort of wrapped up, sorry. Yes, so last week we kind of wrapped up the more general part of our sessions, and we sort of wrapped up our session on critical thinking. We looked at what it looks like to look at content as a reader and writer. We looked at thinking and reading rhetorically by focusing on the element of audience, purpose, and voice. These are aspects that we have covered in previous sessions as well. And I believe that as we engage, particularly in writing activities, that we would be mindful of these as we write. And then we also looked at modes of persuasion as part of, this the series on thinking critically and reading critically and being able to write effectively. We covered then the modes of persuasion of ethos, pathos, and logos, and we talked about where they show up in different types of text or discourse, and how to identify them, and also just how to be mindful of maintaining a solid balance, or quite a nice balance between ethos, pathos, and logos in our academic writing. So that's what we covered last week. Are there any questions on that? Is everyone happy? For those who were not here last week and would want to maybe catch up on that session, you're welcome to check your My Life. I believe that the recordings are available. The recordings of the session are available for all registered students. So you're welcome to go and check that recording out. All right. Welcome to everyone. I see some more people have joined. Welcome. I was just telling the guys, the other students earlier, that you guys must just bear with me today. I'm not feeling 100%. I'm at about 60%. So I'm gonna really try to push today. Okay. So today, as I mentioned last week, we are starting with we are starting with our series on basically unpacking our study guide. And I really wanted us to do this so that we have an opportunity to engage with our study material, especially because this is the core material for this module. And I do know that, we might not always get to it as students, as, workers, parents, sisters, brothers. We have different roles. And so we might, because the study guide is so big, it is quite a chunky book. I thought, we might not, if you guys don't have an opportunity to read through it in preparation for essays, I believe that us going through it would, really help. And I hope that some of you guys have started also reading, especially the unit that we're going to discuss today, so that it really is just a broad overview of the unit. And I'm not really needing to go too much into depth and too much into detail, because you would have gotten all of that by reading through it. This is also a good place for you guys to now pose any questions that you had, or ask for clarity on any of the topics within this unit. I welcome all questions, and we can discuss them all together. So just feel free to make use of the chat function there to add all your questions as we are going along. Please feel free to pop it at any time, so that I can stop and then address it. Otherwise I move, and then it's a bit difficult to come back and address questions. So yes, that's what we're doing today. As I said, I hope everyone has their study guide with them, so we can just move through this together, right? Right, so Unit 1 really gives us an introduction to research, right? Because our module is social science research research for the social sciences, right? That's our module code, module name. And so Unit 1, as the introductory unit, gives us an introduction to what research is. By telling us that, listen, we do research every single day. We do research, but it's not, okay, but we just don't do systematic research. And you may ask yourself, what? I don't do research every day. But basically, it's telling us what research is a system of inquiry. Inquiry is like you're looking for something, you're looking for an answer to something, right? And we do this every day. If we are walking down the street and we see, let me try to think of this example. Basically we are trying to understand stuff every day. We're trying to understand how things work. We're trying to we ask ourselves questions, and we're trying to answer these questions in our head all the time. For example, if I'm at the shop and I get to the cashier and she is not very nice with me, I'm going to be asking myself questions in my head like, oh, what's wrong with her? Or I wonder if she's had a bad day. So you ask yourself these questions, basically trying to understand what has gotten the cashier to the space that she's at, right? So that you're making an inquiry. It's just like it's more like an internal inquiry, and you're not really expecting an answer from anyone or even yourself. Sometimes you just ask a rhetorical question to yourself and you go on about your day. But now with research, it's sort of we're taking it one step further. As we're saying, okay, we've identified this phenomena, this thing that's happening, and now we want to really find an answer to it. So we want to do a systematic search or a systematic inquiry to understand what's happening. So then in that case, I would say, I want to examine the moods of cashiers by around like 4 or 5 p.m. because it seems like most cashiers are grumpy around this time. So if I'm going to do research, I'm going to take it further and then, put together a list of questions, a list of methods, really a nice system that's going to help me go from asking this question, collecting data, analyzing the data, and then having that data basically give me the answer to it. So it's about finding an answer to questions that we ask every day, but just doing it in a systematic way. So, yes. So, Unit 1 then tells us that science itself is a process of inquiry, right? It's a way of learning and knowing things about the world around us. And this is so we inquire every day. So we're sort of kind of in the process of science, but the difference here is, and that's on our last point, is that with science, it is systematic. In our everyday lives, we're not having a 10-point plan about how we're going to find out why this cashier is grumpy, right? So that's what science is. It really, they say scientific thinking makes sense, so it has to be logical. It has to have a reference or an observed evidence. So I see something happening, and then has to give an explanation of what we are seeing, right? So that is basically the answer for the why is this thing happening. And then they say that research is then us taking a look or taking another look. I mean, in the study unit, they actually say to us, that means to do again, as we know, like repeat, redo, reconnect, reunite, something that's that's happening again. And then search, of course, we're looking for something. So basically with research, we're taking another look, or we're looking again at social events. And so that again means now I'm looking at it with the view that I really want to observe this thing about the cashiers being grumpy. So an initial or everyday inquiry will just be me just seeing, oh, grumpy cashier, think about it in my head, move on with my day. But now researching it means I'm really going to take another look at it. I'm going to take a deeper look at it, and I'm going to be systematic in how I go about it, so I can really, observe something and get an answer to, or get an explanation about the observation that I've made. So in other words, it's making a careful and planned study of the social events that we observe. So then, essentially in scientific research, when we put it together, means that we are systematically examining and thinking about a question, right? It's not just a, oh, by the way, thing, and then you move on. It's about really sitting down and systematically thinking about how you want to answer this question. Right. Is everyone happy with, I hope everyone's happy with that. I'm going to move. Right, so then we are introduced to the concept yes, the concept of knowledge, right? So what is knowledge? Knowledge is what we know, right? And part of research is, remember, when you ask a question, you want to know something, right? So you're looking for an answer, you're looking for knowledge. But the study unit tells us that there's already knowledge that we have. All of us, like as we sit here, all of us are sitting with vast amount of knowledge. So where then does that knowledge come from? And we are then introduced to basically the general or sources of general knowledge. And the first one being tradition. A lot of us, or maybe let me just read here. It says that we all inherit a culture which contains accepted knowledge of the ways of the world. This means that we accept what other people know and tell us. So a lot of us basically will come from, if we come from a certain culture or certain tradition, a certain culture, that culture will have different ways of, different types of knowledge, right? The culture will say, oh, marriage looks this particular way. And so based on our exposure to that culture, we take that knowledge on. That's basically traditional knowledge. We take it on and we accept that to be true. So wherever we go in the world, we are walking with the assumption or with this idea of marriage based on our culture, right? So this knowledge that comes from tradition, because our forefathers told us that this is how marriage looks like, this is what marriage is about, so we believe that. And essentially they have, and we believe it because we, of the sense that we hold valuable what the people who were before us, found. And tradition is useful because it helps us to understand the world. It helps us to understand certain things, and most of the times, if you already have a certain understanding of something based on tradition and you accept it and it works for you, then you really don't need to go through the effort of finding this knowledge yourself, right? Because you learn it from, and again, we learn these things as we grow up. Your parents will tell you girls must act a certain way, or boys must act a certain way, or, you know, you don't go out at night, you know, and that becomes, because, you know, like bad things will happen at night. And then that becomes sort of part of your knowledge base. So you accept that as truth. So it tells us that the negative thing about tradition, or really accepting everything from tradition as the source of knowledge, is that it can lead to into falsehood. You may be led into falsehood. It says, because you don't know how that information or how that knowledge came about initially, right? You don't know what happened initially that made your grandmother and then your mother and then you believe that going out after, let's say, 10 is a bad thing, right? So you basically blindly, as we follow blindly, it really it limits you, because you're not going out and seeking out why did they come to this conclusion actually, right? So you don't actually question it, and you just accept. And we know anything that, you know, is accepted blindly can be dangerous, because you don't know what the source of that information was, and you don't know if it was founded on something logical, if maybe someone just thought about it. You can just assume that, oh, something must have happened, and then people deduce this is, maybe someone just thought about, oh, 10 o'clock is not such a nice time, let me tell this person, and then this person told their child, and then that person told their child, and then it became a tradition, right? So it's always important to question the knowledge or the information that we get, even if it is from tradition. Right, I don't see any questions, so I'm going to move on. The next one is authority. And authority is very similar to tradition, except here we're basically accepting something as being true because of the status of the person who discovered this thing, or the status of the person telling us about something. So we are basically relying on this person's authority as our source of knowledge. Sorry. So, for example, if my father tells me something, I'm going to perhaps more when I was younger, you know, I would immediately believe it, right? I would say, yes, that's true. Why? Because I believe in the authority that my father has, that, oh, he's been on this earth for much longer than I have. He has all this experience. Surely if he's telling me going out after 10 is really, really bad, then it must be true, right? So you're relying on the authority of someone else to inform your understanding of something. It could also be in the case of maybe more specifically to the research space. If you see that a certain professor has said that this is how students learn best, and everyone sort of accept that because, well, he's been a professor for 15 years, maybe 15, for 25 years. And, you know, he's worked in this field for so long. Of course, if he's going to say that this is how students learn best, then that must be it. So we just accept it based on the authority of this professor, because he's a professor in education. So the problem with that is, so before I go to that, so that helps us, you know, acquiring knowledge from authority is not necessarily a bad thing. It helps us because we don't have to necessarily go into the effort again of, you know, going and finding out, oh, how do students learn best? Why, when there's someone has already written about it, right? Someone already with authority on the subject has already said, this is how students learn best. We can then just go on and add to that, or explore it further in a different context. But the problem comes in when we overestimate the expertise of the person in authority, right? And basically, this in the study unit, it just tells us that, listen, even experts can be wrong. So just because we see that this is this professor has authority and he's been in the field for 25 years, at the end of the day, he's still a human and he can still be wrong. And so it then becomes difficult for us to accept that this person can also actually be wrong. And also, especially if we don't know how that person got to that knowledge or how they arrived at that conclusion, then it becomes dangerous for us to just accept their conclusion. Yes. So basically, I think what the study unit really is trying to stress to us that when it comes to research or maybe just life in general, to be mindful of what we accept as truth, and to not just unquestionably accept things because, the person that is telling us something has a certain authority. I see a comment here. Believing knowledge from authority, especially in South African content, has kept people mentally oppressed. Yeah, that is a very, very true point. Very important. So sometimes, authority is what keeps people oppressed, as Nicole says, because we can look at, maybe, if I don't want to get too political, but if we look at our government, right, there's so many people in authority and they say certain things. And if we just, as the citizens of the country, if we just believe everything that is said because, oh, that's the president said this, so you take it like completely true, then that's a very dangerous position to be in, right? Because then you're not taking into account the fact that, okay, but the president is still human. The president can make mistakes. The president can have alternative motives, so we can't really accept everything as 100% truth without questioning it first, and trying to find within ourselves, do the research for ourselves. Cool. And then the next one is mysticism and religion. And this is, of course, we know that religion also offers a type of knowledge base for us, and religion is basically, I'd say, a form of authority. We are believing the authority of a sacred text, or like the Bible, the Quran, or a supernatural force. This is what the study unit says. So we are believing that this entity, whether it's God and the Bible, that the knowledge that is being given or is being communicated to us from those entities, we believe those as truth. And that is how religion can be a form of knowledge base, right? And so we walk our lives, or we sort of live our lives according to this knowledge that we have been given, and we let it guide us. So study guide tells us that although religion is useful in our lives and giving us meaning, it says that it's not a reliable guide to knowledge about the actual state of the world. And as we know, there's been lots of debate between science and religion about what's real and what's not, and how the earth was created and all of that. So I think even with things like this, it's good to always go back and do your own research, because if you're going just straight for the science and saying, oh no, it was, what is it, the Big Bang Theory, it's either that or it's God made the heavens and the earth. So I think it's about really sitting down and questioning what you accept or what your knowledge is, and then having a solid argument for why you believe what you believe. Maybe off topic, but even if religion is what you believe in, I think it is important, as an academic, as a student, to have a basis to back up why you say you believe what you believe, so that you're not caught up in like debates and then you're like, I just believe this thing, and then you don't know why you believe it, right? One of the Yes. So what science then is saying is that for progress to take place, for knowledge to build, that everyone must be allowed the freedom to pursue knowledge and to question things no matter what it is. So I don't think there's anything wrong with questioning things, as long as we're not being disrespectful to people's beliefs and standpoints. But it is important to question, and that is what the study unit is encouraging of researchers to do. Right. And then the next one is common sense, and this is what we engage in every day. Common sense basically being our ordinary reasoning. So this form of reasoning relates to what we know intuitively, right? Or what our instincts tell us. And so we walk through the world really using our common sense most of the time, using our common sense. So if you're about to cross the road and you see a car coming, your common sense is going to tell you to take a step back, right? Because you know what would happen if you're walking across the road and the car is also coming across, right? So our common sense, and with common sense, you don't necessarily have a reason. I think I saw it somewhere here. You don't really have like a very deep or detailed explanation for why you believe what you believe, or why you know what you know. It's actually about knowledge. So why you know what you know, right? It's just like it just makes sense. Obviously, Amazon walk when the car crossing, when the Amazon cross the road when there's a car coming, right? It's like it just makes sense. So there are some things in life as we go about, we don't necessarily need deep research or systematic inquiries. We just know that, okay, this makes sense, this doesn't make sense. But the problem is that our common sense doesn't systematically consider how ideas are related to each other, like I said, we don't take ourselves through this long process of why I mustn't cross the road. Like in that moment, you just make the decision. So it's not like a systematic process where you sit down and you think, okay, here's a car coming. Okay, here must I now cross? Must I? Let me weigh the options. Let me do a little bit of research about it. You just do it. And most of the time, common sense does come from tradition as well. Okay, and then the final one is media myths. And we know, especially in this day and age, that the mass media, TVs, radios, newspaper, the internet has a powerful influence on knowledge, on what people believe to be true or not. A lot of people basically develop the concept of reality from the media. This is how, even from a young age, this is how we know, or we are socialized. Basically, a big way that we are socialized is through family, right? So tradition, and through the media. So we see things on TV and we see that, okay, so that means this is how things are supposed to be. If we are constantly in the media seeing a family consisting of mom, dad, big brother, little sister, 2 dogs, then that becomes our idea, or that becomes our knowledge of what the family looks like, right? So the media basically informs your understanding, or our understanding, of social reality, to the point that sometimes people don't even question things anymore because they've been seeing it so many times. And then it just becomes part of the knowledge base. But again, this is then dangerous because you're not able to defend why what you know holds water. And Newman tells us, or according to the study unit, Newman says that the purpose of media is to entertain, right? it's not to present reality accurately. So the things that we are seeing in the media are not necessarily how things are, but because we keep seeing it, we take it to be true. Even now with like fake news being such a big thing, it just goes to show how the media can shift public opinion, can make things that were originally looked upon as bad. Now the media and the internet has shifted the narrative, and certain things now look not bad, and things that were good are like no longer good. So it's just interesting to see how public perception changes. And of course, this is then dangerous if you're just accepting, as we know, if you're just accepting anything you read on the internet, then, not great. And yeah, there are a lot of mistakes that can be made from believing the things from the media, and a lot of mistakes can be made from ignorance. That's what the study unit tells us. All right. Okay. So if there are no questions, I hope everyone really has gotten a nice grasp of these sources of general knowledge, what they are, and how they affect our understanding of knowledge. This is, I think, these I've seen a lot in past exam papers, and in your assignments you've probably come across them. So I think it is important that we really understand them. All right. And then it takes us to errors in human reasoning. So we know now from the discussion, from what we've just been talking about the different sources of knowledge, in all of them we saw that how they can be bad or how they can lead to errors, right? So now Science Basic has come in and said that yes, we understand there are all these different ways that people come to know stuff. There are different sources of knowledge, but as scientists, we want to safeguard against these errors, right? Because science has to be, it's a science. Science is a science. Yeah, research is a science, and with science you need to be able to back things up and really be as error-proof as possible. So there are a number of errors that can come about as a result of the ways that we understand knowledge, and even in the research space. So the first one is inaccurate observations. And so with inaccurate observations, it tells us that before we understand the way things work, we need to have something to understand. That is, before I know why the cashiers are so grumpy at 4 o'clock every day, I need to know what I'm studying. What am I looking for? My what would be the attitudes of cashiers or the energy of cashiers. And I need to know like what's happening first before I can obviously find out why it's happening. So the unit tells us that people tend to be careless when it comes to observing everyday events. So we'll see something, but we're not really thinking about what we're seeing. And sometimes we see something and we think we saw something, but we didn't really see something. So with the cashier example, I might think the cashier was grumpy. Now I'm going and I'm going to say, hey, I want to do the study about cashiers and why they're so grumpy. Maybe only that particular cashier, maybe she wasn't grumpy. Maybe she was just tired. Or maybe that's just her face. So it's there. That already means that I've made an inaccurate observation. I'm going around saying she's grumpy. Meanwhile, this lady was just tired. Or meanwhile, she just has that face. Like that's just her normal face. You see, so we tend to make inaccurate observations. So that's why in everyday inquiries. So that's why with the difference with that then and with a scientific observation is that it is more deliberate, it is more conscious. So we are ensuring that we are putting measurements in place to ensure that what we are observing, what we say we are observing, and that what we're observing is actually what's happening. So yes, that is inaccurate observation. Another error that we make all the time is overgeneralization. And as we know, overgeneralization means that we make a conclusion based, we make a conclusion about a particular thing after we've only seen a few cases of that thing, right? So a big generalization now that's, happening in the news is the crime rate, right? And they are saying, and then sort of the narrative that what they said, like Nigerians and Zimbabweans are the cause of crime and increased crime rates in South Africa. So that is an overgeneralization, because the people who have observed that maybe only observed a few cases. They saw a few cases of the people from a certain country committing crime, and now they generalize and say that all people from a particular country commit crime, right? So I think that's probably the simplest example I can give there. We are usually, I think it's just human nature, we are usually very fast, and we all have a tendency to overgeneralize, and because we want to get to a conclusion really quickly. And this happens even in research. After I've maybe observed 4 cashiers, then I start generalizing and saying, oh yeah, all cashiers are grumpy at this time. Meanwhile, I've only seen 4 cashiers. How many cashiers are there in the world? Wait, how many cashiers are there in Cape Town alone? And I've only seen 4 cashiers, and suddenly I'm making this general statement about cashiers. So there already we see how that can have major, how that is a major error in inquiry. And part of overgeneralization is something called the halo effect that is also mentioned in the study unit. And so the halo effect is basically the opposite, I'd say. No. The halo effect is basically when it is a form of generalizing, of overgeneralizing, but it's more in a positive context. So halo, if you think of halo, it's like an angel. So it's basically if you see something positive, you observe a positive trend, and then you immediately make a conclusion that all of that thing is positive, right? So maybe if I can give an example. Okay, there is an example in the study unit. It says, for example, say we respect someone or an institution, and then we overgeneralize by saying that this person or this institution is so wonderful in everything. And then we're basically giving them a proverbial halo. We're putting like a halo on their head, like saying, oh no, nothing about this thing is bad. For example, okay, that was the example, but I want to give my own. If private schools, right? So if I've been to maybe 3 private schools, or I've, went and conducted research in 3 private schools, sorry. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, all private schools are, and they were very good. I saw that the students were well behaved, they were well dressed, the curriculum was on point, the teachers were always on time, the students were engaging in class, the school fees wasn't too expensive, So I see all these positive things about these private schools. Now I go back, and I've only gone to 3. Now I go back and I'm like, private schools in South Africa are the best things. Send all your students. They are so wonderful. And by overgeneralizing, I'm failing to see the negatives, right? I don't allow myself to see the negatives about the private schools because I've put this halo basically on private schools' head. I think that's a much nicer example. Right. So I think there is a comment here. So how science tries to safeguard against overgeneralization. And really, we're talking about all of this in the context of research, right? So you're conducting a research study. Sorry, I was just looking at the chat. So how do we then safeguard, or how do we prevent overgeneralization in research? The process of replication. So replication is basically, as it says, replicating, so repeating a study. So if I went to 3 schools, I need to go to 3 more schools and then 3 more schools, you know, and basically do the same study over and over to see if I'm going to get the same result. And then only I can make a generalization on private schools, right? But if I go to the next 3 schools and I see that something is not so nice about it, then I can't say that all private schools are the best things in the world, right? Because now my data is showing me that not necessarily. And we, in science and in research, we are led by our data, not by our own sort of observations. So we can only be confident in our generalizations if we have replicated the study a few times and gotten the same results. Okay. Okay, it was just some admin issues. The next one is selective observation. And guys, I am just working through the study unit. So if there is something that you see that I've not touched on, please feel free to just let me know so I can touch on it. Because like I said, I'm just trying to do like a high-level overview here. Okay, the next one is selective observation. And they say that overgeneralizations often lead to selective observation. And so basically it's this case where once you've made a decision, so I made a decision already that private schools are top notch, right? They are the best. I've made my observations and I've made my decision and my conclusion that this is it, right? Now, someone told me, oh, but you have to go and do more studies, right? You have to do more observations in other schools so that you prevent overgeneralization. Now I'm going into the other schools, selectively observing. Now I only want to look for the things that I know are good in the next 3 schools, because I knew the school uniform was good in that school. I'm going to look at school uniform in this new school, right? So you start basically choosing, or the researcher starts choosing the things that they want to observe so that it can basically prove their generalization. So how science safeguards against that is by using a research design which specifies the number and kind of observations we need before we can make a conclusion. So then in my initial research design, I would have had to say, before I can make a conclusion on private schools, I need to have observed maybe 20 private schools. And in those private schools, I need to have looked at this. So I can't go to the next private school and not look at 3 things because they were so positive in the previous school. Then now I just want to, then I can't make a conclusion based on that. So my research design is the thing that's going to outline how I'm going to go about conducting my research, how I'm going to go about selecting how many observations I'm going to do, what I'm going to be looking at, so that at the end of the day, I can make a conclusion based on all of that, having taken everything into account. Okay, I'm just seeing student numbers here. Right, so the next one is ego involvement in understanding. And the study unit tells us that we are personally as well as intellectually involved in our search for knowledge. So we basically, anything that we're trying to study, anything that we're trying to find out as researchers has some sort of influence, I want to say, has an influence on us, or is in some way connected to us. So if I'm doing that study about the cashier, right? If I'm doing the study about the cashier, I'm doing it because there's some sort of involvement there. I experienced this. Now I want to study it because, you know, there's this personal connection to the subject matter. If you're doing a study about crime in a particular area, maybe it's the area that you grew up in, you know, so you have a particular connection to this area, and this is why you want to do a study on it and find solutions to the problem. So most of the times, the things that we are going to research, we're going to choose as research topics, are in some way connected to us. So how ego involvement comes in is that because there's some sort of connection with us and the topic, we have some sort of understanding of what's going on, right? So as you're in that community, you say, oh, I know that in certain streets, that is where the gangsters are, in maybe from 16th Avenue to 18th Avenue, right? I know because I grew up, I have this connection to this community, so I know that this is where the gangsters are. So now I want to do research already with this understanding that this is how things are in this community. But now I do my research, and my research shows me that actually there's gangsters hiding in 12th Avenue and 11th Avenue. But I already was like, my ego was, my understanding was fixed that, oh no, I'm right. This is, you know, I've been in this community, I know. So your research proves something else, and now it's difficult for you as a researcher to come out and say, oh yeah, I was wrong actually. So it's actually not 16th to 18th Avenue, it's actually 10th to 12th Avenue. So yeah, basically it's this concept where we commit ourselves to our own understanding of something before the research has had a chance to show us what's actually happening. And so how science basically prevents us or safeguards us from our ego involvement is by ensuring that, listen, we put forth a hypothesis, and your hypothesis you'll put at the beginning of your study. You're saying, you know, I hypothesize that, you know, the gangsters in 16th and 18th Avenue, da, da, da. And then at the end of your research, you need to now, after that, then you can prove or disprove and say, actually, the hypothesis I was incorrect. This is actually what's happening. And that's okay in research. That's like part of the process of research. You know, we have certain understandings, and it gets challenged, and the data shows us something else, and that's okay. So we can then consider that objectively because we've gone through the process of scientifically researching it. Okay, I'm seeing it's a lot of me talking today, so I hope you guys are still with me. I'm hearing my voice so much today. Is everyone still with me? Are we still good? Are we still following? Okay, perfect. Okay, and then the final one in terms of errors in human inquiry is the premature closure of inquiry. And I think that the words maybe are self-explanatory, but it basically means that we ask questions for a short while, we get some answers, and then we stop our inquiry. So as a result, our attempt to understand something stops before the understanding is complete. So if I just go back to the cashier example, right? If I stop interviewing cashiers after I've interviewed 5 cashiers, now I stop because I'm like, oh, I got the information that I needed from these 5 cashiers. That's a premature closure of inquiry. And what happens there is maybe the 6th cashier was going to give me something different, right? Was going to give me information that would now bring a different element to my study or a different element to my understanding of this phenomena. But now I've closed the inquiry, or I've stopped asking questions too soon. So ultimately, my findings are not going to be accurate because I didn't, get as much information as possible. So how science safeguards against premature closure of inquiry is by doing a thorough literature review on the topic. So basically making sure that you have read, as the researcher, as much as possible. You have read up on a lot, not everything, but as much as you can on this topic, so that it's not that, oh, I know everything because I've read one book. You know, one book is not going to give the understanding that you need to cover the whole topic. So it's important to read widely, and even in the data collection, that's why it's important to also collect a lot of data, because collecting a lot of data is important. Ooh. Okay, I see we are still together. That's great. Great. Okay, so if there are no questions on those sections, I hope that they are clear, and that as we come across them in our assignments and in our exams, that we'll be able to understand what these errors in human inquiry are, and how. I think it's beyond the what they are, it's also how does science safeguard us against these things happening, because it's one thing to know what they are. It's one thing to obviously see and say, oh, overgeneralization, I know what that is, but how does science then prevent us as researchers from overgeneralizing? And I think that's important to note. Okay. Next thing, the next heading that we have in the study unit is about scientific norms. No, was it scientific norms? Yes, scientific norms. So scientific norms are rules are rules of conduct in particular situations, or norms, sorry, just norms, or rules of conduct in particular situations that are enforced by positive or negative sanctions. As we know, every society, every group, every family, every community has certain rules and norms of behavior that basically guides how people should act in that particular setting. So just as I said there, just as behavior in any human community is regulated by social norms, so the scientific community is governed by those norms that researchers learn and internalize as an essential part of their training. So again, these norms are basically to ensure that everyone in the research community is doing the right thing, is conducting research that is fair, and that they are actually conducting their research in the right way, and they're not violating any norms. Right, so we have 5 main norms that are listed here. The first one is universalism. And universalism tells us that irrespective of who is conducting the research, and irrespective of where this research is being conducted, that research is to be judged only on the basis of scientific merit. So basically, if I get a research paper from Professor Jonathan Jansen, for example, and for those who don't know, Professor Jansen is the Dean of Students at is the Dean of Education, at Stellenbosch University. He's written widely on, the education landscape in South Africa. So if I get a research paper, someone tells me, okay, you need to review this research paper, I need to basically mentally block out the person that wrote this paper. I need to block out where this person wrote this paper on. I need to block out what the study, where the study was conducted, and basically just analyze it or just review that research paper based on its scientific merit. How was it conducted? What methodologies did he use? Were the methodologies carried out properly? Was ethics considered was the analysis, you know, does it fit? Does it make sense? So basically universalism is saying my review needs to be the same, whether it's a Jonathan Jansen, whether it's a Professor Jonathan Jansen, or if it's a Mary first year in psychology's report, right? So all research needs to be reviewed universally with a universal frame, regardless of, well, basically there must be no biases or no favorites. Oh, because this is Professor Jonathan Jansen, I'm not gonna critique this thing too much because obviously he's a prof, obviously he's like well versed in this. I still need to look at that research objectively and say, on the basis of scientific merit, does this research stand? So that's our concept of universalism. The next one is organized skepticism. And this is just tells us that scientists should not accept any new ideas or evidence in a carefree, uncritical manner. Again, it's saying this thing of like organized skepticism is just saying basically be skeptical about everything that you're reading as a researcher, right? So challenge the evidence that you see, even if it's that paper by Prof. Jonathan Jansen. Challenge the methods, challenge the evidence, challenge how it was done, challenge everything that you read, not in a way to attack the writer or the person who did the research, but just so that the research itself can stand up to examination, right? Because, you know, it might go to me as a first review, and then it's going to go to, you know, someone else as a second review, and then that person's going to say, but how come the first reviewer didn't catch all these things? You know, because you need to ask, as the researcher, you need to ask hard questions. And as you guys are going to also start producing research, or probably already have produced research, you know, you need to think about what are the questions that people are going to ask when they're reading your research. Is it going to stand up to scientific examination on its own? Right. And then the next one is disinterestedness. Wow, these words. The next one is disinterestedness. And this is saying that then scientists must be neutral. I think as we go through it, you begin to see a pattern with all of these norms. You begin to see what the scientific community really holds valuable, or like is so valuable about. So yes, disinterestedness says that scientists must be neutral, impartial, receptive, and open to unexpected observations or ideas. So basically, as you're conducting your research, you basically saying you're not allowed to gravitate towards your biases in your research. You know, this is where we talked about ego. This is, I think, one of those things that will address ego. You're not allowed, or you shouldn't really be gravitating towards, oh, this is my point of view, so I want my research to reflect my point of view. But they should accept and look for evidence that even runs against their own position, and should honestly accept all findings based on high quality research. So even though my point of view was that the gangsters are in 16 to 18 Avenue, I should be open to the fact that actually I could be wrong, and they could be in 10th to 12. And I need to be open to that, and I need to present that in my research as well. So the research should really be as objective as possible. And then we have communalism. And if you think about the word, the root word there is commune, right? So the coming together of people. So communalism is saying that everything that is produced in the scientific community must be shared with others. Maybe a good way to remember communalism, if you come across it in your exams and your assignments, just think of the word community and, you know, the sharing of things together. So they're saying that scientific knowledge must be shared with others. It belongs to everyone. So they say that scientific knowledge is a public act, and the findings are public property available for all to use. So if I'm doing that study on private schools, I shouldn't hold that research to myself. If I find something about the systems, I need to make it public to people. I need to, make it open to government and the education department. And, it is for public consumption. That is what research is for. So everyone should have access to that research so that it can help to inform the understanding, because research is about knowledge, creating new knowledge. So why would you create knowledge and then just put it in your library and keep it there? And then what's the point, right? It's just the same way when artists create new music, it's for public consumption. They're not going to just create a new song and leave it on their laptops or discs or CDs. I don't know what they use, but basically it is for public knowledge, for public consumption. Right. And then we have honesty, which is a general cultural norm, as we know, but it is particularly strong in the scientific community, in the research community. We know how seriously our universities take things like plagiarism. So it just shows that dishonesty in the scientific community is a major, major taboo. It really isn't handled well because, you're really putting your whole study into question. If you're stealing other people's work, it means you're not creating your own knowledge. You're not contributing to the scientific community. You're not contributing to your general community. You're just stealing from someone else and getting the credit. And yeah, in the scientific community, it's like a major, major no-no. Right. This is why we're always stressing on plagiarism and how bad it is, because the scientific community really takes it very seriously. All right. Are there any questions? I do want to pause at this point and just see if there are any questions, any thoughts right now, any of how it relates to maybe some work that you've been doing, any thoughts about a question that you came across in your assignments. Yeah, the floor is yours. You can please pop it in the chat, but I do want to take like 2 minutes to rest my voice also. Is there anything you've seen from the topics that we've just discussed in your study unit that I haven't maybe mentioned or covered that you'd want me to look at? If you can maybe, I think at this point, if we can go through your study guides, I think everyone has it with them now. Have your study guide, maybe look through those first few pages and the topics we've covered and see if anything jumps out at you that we did not cover yet and that you have seen in your assignment. Okay, so I'm going to give us about 5 minutes to do that. And you can just put it in the chat and we can maybe discuss it.
Hi, Lorraine, can you hear me?
Hi,
Okay.
Adele. Yes.
Are some people struggling?
Adele?
Okay, no, I see that some people are struggling to hear.
Oh, no, we are going through our study units. Oh, yeah. Hi, Anine. Sorry, we are currently just looking through the study unit. We are looking at unit 1, and so I've just asked everyone to take a look and see if there are any topics that I haven't covered yet that they want us to discuss, or anything that they came across in maybe your assignment that we haven't touched on yet, and then we can pop it in the chat. That's why it's quiet. And I gave 5 minutes for that, but I'm not seeing any comments, so I'm going to assume that everyone is happy, everyone is comfortable with the content that we have covered. All right, perfect. Yeah, so I'm hoping that everyone is happy with the content that we've covered, and really getting a good understanding of these sort of foundational elements of scientific research. Yeah, because this is where then we will build onto continuing from next week. So it is very important that we all understand this initial unit. Okay, Nicole, I see you say research has the potential to give the voiceless a voice. Okay, what would you want us to discuss about that? I'm assuming that is from the study unit, right? You are welcome to unmute your mic, Nicole, if you want to maybe just explain your thoughts around that quote. I think I must maybe just get some more context around that. Nicole or Anine, maybe you guys can, one of you maybe just give us some more context around that. If it was in the assignment, under what question was it? Or well, yeah, just what about the quote? Is it?
Hello. Hello.
Yes, hi Nicole.
Um, yeah, it's just I think it with especially if you're doing qualitative research and you're listening to people's stories, um, you people have been silent previously, and if you're listening to their stories, you can sort of give them a voice. Or I guess their stories are also important, and their stories can, I guess, it relates to other people's stories as well.
Yeah, exactly. And this is why we say research is, it's for public use, because you are, especially in the social sciences where we are working with people, the research that we're doing is not on objects, not like in the natural sciences. We are working with people. So you are basically going in and hearing people's stories, understanding what is the effect of crime in this particular area from the mouths of the people who are experiencing the crimes every day, so you can, you hear the stories and you collect your data. And so there's also a responsibility as the researcher too, and I think we'll touch on this in the unit on ethics. But there is this responsibility from the researcher to ensure that, one, they protect the stories and the voices and the people who is giving them this information, but to also present it fairly, and to put it out there in a way that is that gives the people dignity, some sort of dignity also. And as you put the research out there, of course, you essentially, as you've quoted there, you give them a voice. You know, you put your research in out on government platforms, and a government official might pick it up and hear the voices or read, you know, the stories and read the experiences of the community, you know, a small community in Kensington or in Lansdowne that they might not have gotten an opportunity to ever engage with. So you bring the stories of everyday people out there. So yeah, very, very important component. Thanks, Nicole. There's a question, are we going to look at the approaches to research next week? No, so we're actually going to consider that today. It is part of our session. So thank you for the comments there. Thank you for the question. Yeah, I think we must then move on quickly. All right. So the next heading that we have in our unit is basically just an outline of the stages of research, and this is basically the outline that the rest of the study unit takes us through. You know, this is the process. When I said at the beginning that with research we're taking a systematic, Lord, English, we are systematically going through this process of an inquiry, right? So this is our process, and it contains 4 stages. The first stage is you define the problem, and it just makes sense. You need to know what it is first off the bat. What is it that you're wanting to study? What is it that you're wanting to research, to examine? Is it the crime in, you know, Kensington? Is it the school absenteeism in Mandalay? You know, what is it that you're wanting to research? So you define your problem in that first stage, and this part of your definition of the problem includes setting up that research design or that plan. And the plan really is, the research design really is like a blueprint. You know, before you build a house, there's, you know, the architect first does it like draw up a blueprint, right? And that's going to determine everything about the house. It's going to determine where it is, how big it's going to be, you know, how many rooms, how many bathrooms, where's the bathroom going to be, what water, what plumbing it needs, what kind of windows it needs. So everything is going to be included in that blueprint, and that is what your research design is. It gives you that blueprint. So you're going to say, this is the thing I'm going to study, this is how I'm going to study it, this is for how long I'm going to study, this is who I'm going to talk to, etc., right? So that is our research design. The research problem then comes in, and you say, right, this is, I want to look into the crime in Delft, for example, right? That's your research problem, and you really need to unpack it so that the person who's going to read it can see that you really have an understanding of what the problem is. From there, we're going to move on into a literature review. And the literature review is where you basically read up on material around this topic, so crime in Delft, but then you're not just staying in Delft when you're doing your literature review, you're of course broadening it out, and usually we go from general to specific. So you'll maybe talk about crime in general in South Africa, and then you find research about crime, you find research about crime in South Africa, and then you basically scale it down until you get to the problems of crime in Delft, and what effects it has on the community, what has other researchers found about the same topic, so that it gives you a theoretical basis for your study, right? And from your literature review, you will get theories. This is what the other people have said. These are the explanations that have been given for this thing, for this phenomenon. You also have at this point your assumptions, your hypothesis, and your research questions. So again, remember when I talked about the assumptions in the example about ego involvement. You come in as a researcher, you coming in with assumptions, and we can't say that we don't. Anyway that we go into, we do come in with assumptions. So you coming in with certain assumptions as the researcher in that community, you think that, you may be thinking that, it's certain people, certain groups of people, certain age group that is the perpetrators of crime. So you need to also basically lay that out in your defining problem stage, that these are the assumptions that you are coming into the research with. And of course, as you do go through the process of research, then we'll see, if those assumptions and those hypotheses are true or not. Right. And then the next stage, once you've basically laid the ground, you know what you're studying, you know what other people have said about it, you know the theories, you've put out your assumptions and your questions, you go about obtaining the information. And this is, of course, through sampling and data collection. And we will touch on these in further units. So I don't want to dwell too much on them now. But we know sampling and data collection is then this process of actually going out, finding people in the community that you're going to talk to, that you're going to interview, and asking them about their experiences. It's also the process where you basically design how you're going to go about it, who you're going to approach. So this process needs to be very detailed, because you can't just say, okay, I'm going to speak to 20 people in the community. How are you going to pick those people? Who are those people going to be? You need to ensure that those people are a representative sample, that, they can represent the whole community. So if you're only picking 20 mothers, stay-at-home moms, that's not representative of the community of Delft, right? So you need to have a representation from every age group, all genders. Just make sure that it is as broad as possible. But then, like I said, again, we're going to touch on that in later modules, in later units. And then your data collection is actually what are you going to do to collect the information from them? Are you going to do interviews? Are you going to send out surveys? Are you going to go and observe them and watch them? How exactly are you going to get this information? Right. So that's our second stage of the research process. And it usually is the stage that takes a lot of time. Maybe just a note there that it is quite time intensive, this process, because again, you want to make sure that you've collected enough data, that your data is, that you're not prematurely closing your inquiry, as we spoke about in the previous topic. All right, and then we have stage 3, and this is now where you've gotten all your data, you've gotten all the information. Now it's about sitting down and analyzing and interpreting the information that you've got. So there are 2 forms of data that you can collect. It's quantitative data and qualitative data. So then we'll walk through the process of how do we go about describing and interpreting qualitative data, and how do we go about describing and interpreting quantitative data. So yes, that's that process. Each form of data will obviously have its own forms of description, of interpreting, and each forms of data have its own specific uses. In the social science, we mostly use qualitative data, but of course, there are also instances where we do use quantitative data, and that becomes also very useful to add to the credibility of the study. Okay, and then our fourth and final stage of the research, of the research process, is communicating our results, and this basically then involves the writing up of the research report. Once you've done all of the work, you need to then sit down and write everything out, because research, the fruit of your research is going to be your research report. That's how you communicate to people what you've done, and this is what we said needs to then be for public consumption. once you have that research report, because it's not the interviews that you're going to take to the government, right? You can't take the government like 5 hours of recording and say, here's my data, how you need to analyze it, you need to write it up, make conclusions, make recommendations based on it, and then you present that to, you know, the people who have the power to make decisions. And that's quite important, because I think a lot of the times we do research and we don't understand why we do research. Ultimately, research needs to be for the public good, for the common good of society. So especially in social science research, it's not just for it to sit in a library somewhere. It has to be like, we want to solve problems as social science researchers. We want to solve problems in our society. So if you're doing a study on crime in Delft, it's not just because you want to do a study of crime. It's because at the end of that research process, you want to make recommendations, and you want to find solutions to the crime problem, right? So the point of the research was not just to show people that there's crime. The point of it was to show there's crime and then find solutions to the crime problem, right? And then, you know, hopefully send that to government and people who have power to do something about it. All right. Now we move on to ontology and epistemology. This is two words that, yeah, I think a lot of the times does tend to confuse us, but it does form part of the research process, and really is sort of foundational in understanding what we do as researchers. So ontology essentially is, and I'm just going to read here from the slide here, is a branch of philosophy that deals with the nature of reality. So we all have ontological assumptions, and so these assumptions basically refer to what researchers think exists and is real. These ideas are seldom consciously questioned by researchers because they appear to be so obvious. So ontology essentially is, what is your understanding of reality? What do you believe why do you believe things are as they are? Sort of, what is your basis of reality, your understanding of reality, right? For example, you know, we have people who, we have people who believe that the earth is flat. That's their ontological assumption. That's one of their ontological assumptions, right? They believe that the earth is flat. And so everything else relating to earth and life, they will base it on their understanding of the earth being flat, right? And then there are those who believe the earth is round, and, you know, then their understanding, then that will base then they will base their understanding of everything else based on this assumption that they've made. So then, and here you must please, if it's not clear, I did find quite a nice video that explains it a bit clearer. So we're going to just watch that quickly afterwards. And then we have epistemology, and these two words usually go hand in hand. Where you see ontology, you see epistemology. And so epistemology is a branch of philosophy which deals with the nature of knowledge, right? So epistemological questions deal with how we know things and how we explain things. Basically, how do we come to know things? This means we have to decide what types of statements about social reality are permissible. So how do we come to know about things? So ontology is how we perceive reality, what we believe is true about social reality, and epistemology is about how do we go about gaining knowledge based on what we believe is true about social reality. I hope that makes sense. But let's watch this video, and then hopefully that breaks it down a little bit better. You must please let me know if you can see my screen. I think the sound should come out here. Okay.
So what does ontology and epistemology mean? Well, ontology examines the nature of reality, while epistemology examines how you can examine reality. Ontology is interested in addressing the question, what is reality? There are several ontologies that exist. For the purposes of this video, I will use these three ontologies. Firstly, the belief that there is only one single reality or truth. Secondly, the belief that there are multiple realities. Thirdly, that reality is constantly negotiated, debated, or interpreted. Epistemology refers to how an individual understands knowledge, how they understand their own thinking process, and how they think others know. In other words, epistemology addresses the question, how can I know reality? There are several different epistemologies that exist. For the purposes of this video, I will use these three epistemologies. Firstly, the belief that knowledge can be measured using reliable designs and tools. Secondly, the belief that reality needs to be interpreted to discover the underlying meaning. Thirdly, that knowledge should be examined using whatever tools are best suited to solve the problem.
Okay. I think that's just the only bit I actually wanted us to see. Are there any questions on that? Because I know this one gets a bit tricky for us. Okay. I'm going to assume that everyone's okay with that. If it does come up, please just pop it in the chat there. Okay. And then this sort of goes into our ontology, goes into then the three dominant approaches that we have to research, or three ontological approaches to research. So these are actually examples of ontology, or certain views that people hold on the nature of reality. So the first one, and we did actually discuss these briefly in a previous session. It was part of an activity. So the first one is the positivist approach. And maybe just to go back, with science has and continues to evolve. So we have multiple schools of thought, or multiple views of reality and of the world from different scientists through the ages. So three of the most dominant approaches are now what we're going to discuss here. So the first one is the positivist approach. And the positivists basically believe that social reality can be discovered, that it is something that is out there, basically, right? And and so it's basically a systematic way of doing research that emphasizes the importance of observable facts. So the positivists say, listen, social reality is something that's out there. We can observe it. We can study it. And essentially, we have no influence on it. It has no influence on us. It's just like separate from us. And they really believe in value freedom, which says that the researcher's personal views should not and do not influence the collection of data or anything with regards to the research. So you will find a lot of positivists in the natural science, because the natural science, they study things that are usually outside of us, that are out there, that are observable, and they basically derive theories based on these observable facts. So the ontological position is the positivist approach here. What do we think is the epistemology of the positivist approach? Where we said the epistemology is how we come to collect knowledge, how we come to know knowledge. So if we are saying that the positivists believe that reality is out there, what does that mean about how they believe we collect knowledge about that reality? Does anyone know? It's actually now study unit, so on page 23 if you want to find. No takers. Okay, we'll keep after this. I'll just go back to that video and it'll like break it down for us a bit. I'm just going to move on. So the interpretivist approach, or the interpretive approach, is then the group of researchers called interpretivists who argue that social reality is inherently meaningful. And so this is an approach in which it is an approach to social science that emphasizes the importance of insiders' viewpoints to understanding social realities. So the difference here is that the interpretivists are saying that reality isn't something that's happening out there. Reality is something that we are we are always part of. We make something meaningful. We make reality, essentially. So if I can give an example, if I see someone kicking a dog, as an interpretivist, someone kicking a dog, right? So the interpretivist will say that action is only bad because as society, we have given that meaning to it. We have given the meaning that someone kicking a dog is bad, right? So we, the social agents, have given meaning to this reality. But in a different society, maybe if in a society that really didn't care about dogs or animals, someone kicking a dog might not be seen as a bad thing, right? So essentially, we are the constructors of our reality. This is what the interpretivists are saying. And so how the interpretivists go about collecting knowledge, or their epistemology, is that you have to speak to the people themselves. You need to understand how the people are making meaning of a certain situation, and this then influences, the way they would collect data. So they would rather speak to the person, to the people who are experiencing something, because they understand that this thing only has meaning because I ascribe meaning to it. I give it a certain importance, right? I hope that's clear. And then the critical approach is the critical social scientists basically argue that social reality is multi-layered, and it is an approach to social science that emphasizes the need to uncover hidden processes and structures within society. So critical scientists are saying, listen, everything is not as it seems. We can't take things at face value. The media is lying to us. Government is lying to us. We need to question everything that is presented to us. We need to question if families really must have a mom and a dad. Why? Who told us this, right? So the critical scientists, they go in and they based on this questioning route. They like, we shouldn't just believe everything. Everything has been established for a particular reason, and most of the time it's not what we believe it is. So they basically value critical thought, and yeah, they basically also they believe that the social reality is created through the actions of human beings. So the way that we see families isn't something that is natural. Basically, it's not natural. It's something that we human beings created. We created this structure of work roles and all of that stuff. So we need to question why it was created, for what purpose, etc., etc. Right, I hope everyone's still with me. Okay. So those are the three approaches to research. If you have any further questions on it, you're welcome to put it in the chat or to just let me know. Right, so I want us to maybe there's 1 minute to it to see how these approaches basically come into the understanding of ontology and epistemology. Okay. It's so quiet. Okay.
When you combine your ontology and epistemology together, you are able to get a holistic view of how you understand knowledge. This is what we mean when we refer to a research paradigm. Using the ontologies and three epistemologies I mentioned before, I will now show you how these combine to form the three most common research paradigms in social sciences: positivism, constructivism, and pragmatism. Positivists have the ontology that there is one single reality or truth, and the epistemology.
Sorry, can you not see the video? Ooh. No, okay, sorry about that. Let me just retry. That is very strange. And now, sorry about that. Okay, how about now? Video showing now. Okay, thank you.
For this video, I will use these three epistemologies. Firstly, the belief that knowledge can be measured using reliable designs and tools. Secondly, the belief that reality needs to be interpreted to discover meaning. Thirdly, that knowledge should be examined using whatever tools are best suited to solve the problem. When you combine ontology and epistemology, you are able to get a holistic view of how you understand knowledge. This is what we mean when we refer to a research paradigm. Using the three ontologies and three epistemologies I mentioned before, I will now show you how these combine to form the three most common research paradigms in social sciences: positivism, constructivism, and pragmatism. Positivists have the ontology that there is one single reality or truth, and the epistemological stance that knowledge can be measured. In contrast, constructivists believe that there are multiple realities, and the epistemological stance that knowledge needs to be interpreted to discover the underlying meaning. Finally, pragmatists believe that reality is constantly negotiated, debated, or interpreted, and the epistemological stance that knowledge should be examined using whatever tools are best suited to solve the problem. Once you have determined your research paradigm, you are able to establish the approach and methodology that is best suited to examine the knowledge you are interested in. This is why it is important to understand your research paradigm. It will improve the quality of your research.
Okay, so sorry, I'm not sure what happened there where it was in and out. So sorry about that. It must just be my network. I hope you get that and really understand that break. So that's really it for today, guys. I hope that the session provided some useful insight into some of the topics that are covered in the first unit. Next week we will go into unit 2. And I do hope that everyone will come prepared and ready to engage. If there are no questions at this point, I'm just going to ask that we please fill in the evaluation form, and I've just posted it there. Please fill in the evaluation form so that I know if, these sessions are useful for you guys, and if, we must change something up or if it is actually working. It is quite hard. It is quite hard in the online space when I'm not with you guys and can't see if, we're all together and everyone is understanding and is following along. So yeah, the evaluation forms really do help. So please fill this out. Thanks, Fiona. Yeah, I talked a lot today. My voice is almost gone. So I'm glad that it was a good session, but I am glad to give my voice a little bit of a rest. Thank you for staying on, and have a good rest of your Monday, and we'll see you next week with Unit 2. All right. Okay, hi Rowan, welcome. I see today was your first time. Yeah, so it should be on the site on My Life. You should be able to access those recordings. If you can't find it, please email ctntat@unisa.ac.za, and yeah, they can also help you find the recordings. So yes, thank you guys. The evaluation form is in the chat. I'm hoping, I see we're still together, so I'm hoping that, I actually don't know when we'd be able to go back on campus, if anytime soon, but I am really praying that for exam prep we can actually be together and have exam revision, because those are usually much better when we are in the same room. So yeah, I'm crossing fingers that come exam revision time, we can all be in one room together and be able to work through and prep together for that.
Thank you, Lorraine.
Thanks, Adele. I think everyone